First thing I wanted to just say as we begin, sorry, I had to close the window. The neighbors are a little loud. Is just to thank you all for being here. This is the second talk of fluid mutualism, which, like I said, is a term that was born out of the teachings of my teachers, my ancestors, my sister, and my friends. It is a movement that flourishes from ancestral knowledge. And you know, when I think about who I am as a person and how it is that I came to be into this world and even into this space as a professor, I am really only the reflection of my teachers and my community, and it is thanks to them that I am here. I could not have done any of this by myself. So I thank them and I want to just acknowledge them. I also want to take a moment to show gratitude to the earth, which allows all of us to be here breathing together. Tlazokamati miak totlalwi. I am currently in Tenochtitlan, Mexico Tenochtitlan. This is the land of my ancestors, my maternal lineage. So I want to thank and acknowledge my ancestors and the legacy that they left for me to carry forth. And I also want to thank the original peoples of the school where we are situated and where I usually live, which is the Oloni Chochenyo and the land Huchin Yelamu. Um, the Oloni Chochenyo have been in Huchin Yelamu for generations, carrying for the bay, for the forest, for the winds, for the animals, and without them and their efforts, we would not be able to enjoy the life that we have in the bay. Likewise, I would also like to invite all of you to recognize and support original peoples, indigenous peoples in the territories where you live or where you have lived in the past or where you will live in the future. According to various scientific academic sources, original peoples, indigenous peoples take care and sustain 80% of the biodiversity of this planet, even though they are constantly threatened by governments and corporations for this labor to defend water, earth, and life itself. And so, with this small introduction, I first want to welcome our musician for today, which is a dear friend of mine, KJ, Pete Piper of the Bay, an OG in jazz music, a fantastic flutist. And I want to just welcome them to play a little piece. Right now, they're having technical difficulties, so you won't see their video, but you'll hear their music. So, at this moment, KJ, please take it away.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm so sorry that you can't see me. For whatever reason, you can't see me. But anyway, I'll play a little flute and you can't hear the background music, right?
Not, but your flu is going to be amazing.
Okay,
Thank you so much for being here with us.
I got you. Let's see. Thank you.
Thank you so much, KJ. Clapping it up for you. I love you so much and love the work that you do.
I love you
Um,
too, baby.
love you so much. And you'll hear another piece from KJ at the end of the conversation. So at this point, I just want to invite Elisa and Metz Andrade into the circle. So I'm just going to briefly um, introduce you all. So Elisa has been an activist for environmental and food justice in Puerto Rico, Boriken, since she was 13, organizing for the protection of Northeastern Ecological Corridor from mega development, facilitating and setting up farmer exchanges and community gardens. Is a board member of the Model Forest of Puerto Rico and the Northeastern Ecological Corridor Coalition, worked for Enlace of the Caño Martín Peña Community Trust, developing numerous environmental justice initiatives, and a member of the Boricua Organization of Ecological Agriculture. Currently, she is the co-director of La Colmena Cimarrona, a project that cultivates collective strategies towards food autonomy in Antillas, Puerto Rico. So that is my dear friend Elisa, who is joining from Puerto Rico today, and my other dear friend Metz Andrade. Yek alawatiwil nawanutugay Metz wanutsuntugay Andrade. Uh, let me just find it here, is a descendant of the Nahuatl peoples of Sonsonate, El Salvador, and a descendant of the Purépecha Nation in Michoacán, Mexico, with ancestral roots in Durango, Mexico, and San Miguel, El Salvador, that they continue to explore connections with. Metz is the site steward and educator for the College Hill Learning Garden, where she maintains 7 stewardship principles, including an apiary, solar panels, a compost toilet, a green roof, 3 rain gardens, edible gardens, orchids, along with a pond habitat. Metz also leads field trips, workshops, and internships with K through 12th grade SFUSD students. In addition, Metz supports the Hummingbird Farm and apiary, and currently finishing the first year of a 2-year apprenticeship with the SFB because of San Francisco. So at this moment, I just want to give them a round of applause for being here with us. Welcome them here. Do your little fingers. You could use the emoticons, activate the chat. I want to see that you're here and alive. I see a lot of my students are here. And so, yes, the first thing I wanted to ask Ana, Elisa, and Metz, we'll start with Ana. Anna, I wanted to ask, how did you start with this work? What is the roots of this work? How did you begin?
So I guess there's 2 roots. My personal roots, right? But then the roots of the project that I'm in right now. And so I guess my personal roots are very linked to my father's death. When my dad died of pancreatic cancer, I tied immediately the relationship between land and health. And so I started gardening in my community. And I think that was essential to healing that transition. And so from there, I kept on farming and gardening, and have been all my life, and it's what I love. And so we are currently stewarding. I like that word that you just currently used. This land in Vieques, Puerto Rico, which is an island in the southern eastern coast of Puerto Rico. We're a municipality of Puerto Rico. That was long occupied by the military, by the US Navy. For more than 60 years, we were a bombing site for the US Navy. So so there was a lot of community involvement and struggle to take the Navy out of our land. And finally, the Navy left in 2003. But obviously the remnants are still here, and some of the remnants have been that there is no hospital in Vieques. There is no public transportation. We are an island of an island, the colony of Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico is a colony of the US. And so we depend, everything that we have that comes to Vieques depends on imports. And so we import more than 85% of what we eat in Puerto Rico. There's sort of that cipher. But in Vieques, we can feel that even more. You go to the supermarket and the aisles are always empty. And so for us to organize around land and the healing of our land was essential. So that's why we started this project, and the work that we do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Annalisa. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And now, Metz, I want to hear from you, the same question. What are the roots of the labor that you do, right? Why did you start taking care of the earth and this relationship with bees as well? So if you could also speak a little bit on it. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for sharing, Annalisa. Pues I would say similar. My abuelita, descansa en paz, she had diabetes, and I did a lot of, I would say, labor, just learning about hierbas and learning about medicines and herbs and plants for her. And that's like when I was first in college. I was probably like a freshman. I was really trying to support her. She got more sick. And I really just became more passionate about my culture, about my heritage, and learning how a lot of these things like I had seen before and I knew, and from different places in my family. And so I was blessed in connecting with the Cultural Conservancy and the Guardians of the Water internship, where I met Brenny, and we learned about traditional ecological knowledge. We learned about stewardship of water, and also just build authentic relationships with different Indigenous nations, being Novack, a descendant of Nahuatl people. It was just really, really beautiful to share that perspective around land, right? Kind of Annalisa spoke to it, of the colonialism that has happened in different parts, right? And that we experience, and that it's directly connected to the effect of our health and our diets, and even the ability to steward those medicines. And so I was super passionate about stewarding those medicines for my community and for my family. And I started learning more about seeds and got really passionate about water. I got involved with Poder, which is people organizing to demand economic and environmental rights in La Misión, southeast communities of San Francisco. And I became part of a group called Urban Campesinex, which was a group of young adults who were just passionate about seed sovereignty and food sovereignty in our community. And we started a farm, a hummingbird farm in the Excelsior, which is absolutely beautiful. And like the next generation of Urban Campesinex is really stewarding it. And so it's just really beautiful to see that leadership model and cycle. And then that's when I really understood my passion with engaging with youth and teaching youth about these things that I felt like I never learned when I was younger, in a very like cultural context. And I started working at the College Share Learning Garden, where they had an apiary, and I really wanted to be able to support in stewarding that. And so I became a part of the SFB Cause Apprenticeship Program. I'm almost a year through, and I've learned a lot. I'm already I would say I'm doing a lot of the main things of a beekeeper, and stepping into the role of supporting with Hummingbird Farms Apiary.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, both of you, for just introducing that. And I think, you already began to talk about it in this first question, but if you could expand a little bit more for both of you, how do you see this work with the land and especially with bees, right? And directly with creating food that is real food, that is nutritious food. How do you see this work as some connected to political movements and as connected to spiritual movements, right? Particularly, I think for both of you coming from the spaces that you come from, right? So I'm going to pass it first to Elisa.
I always hate to go first, but
Hoy te tocó, hoy te tocó.
como que primero tanteo, tú sabes. So Vieques in particular, which is where we are right now, the bees, and I had prepared this in a presentation. I thought this was very like formal, so I can send it to all of you so that you have the pictures. But it has some music for Kije Cajota that played the flute. Maybe you can hear Maria sing about it. But there's even a song about the struggle in Vieques that Maria, who was one of the first people that occupied Monte Carmelo, which is one of the communities that exists now in Vieques. So when the Navy came and occupied Vieques, when the U.S. Navy came in and occupied Vieques, it took more than like 75% of the land, no? So in around 26,000 acres only, they took around 26,000 acres and only left people in around 6,000, right? So they took all of the land. And so displaced a lot of people who were farming in the land, who had their lives in all of these communities. And so one of the ways that the struggle against the Navy actually was able to advance was because people started occupying land. And some of the people that started or rescuing land, we call it land rescues or rescates de terreno. And so one of the folks that rescued the land was a beekeeper. Vieques has a impressive bee population. We don't have a lot of pesticides or herbicides. The bees that are here are Africanized or more like Caribbean bees that were mixed. And so the bees here are super resistant. And Carmelo, although in that time the Africanized bees hadn't arrived to the Caribbean, this was around in the late 80s, Carmelo used the bees as if it were his belongings and threw the bees to the US Navy. And that was one of the ways. And after that, the beekeeping party started. This was a whole, movement around bees, right? And so it was a great effort, no? Because the same way that we think about Palestine and the bulldozers coming in to take the homes and bulldoze the homes, the same thing happened in U.S. territory, right? So people were literally thrown out of their houses, bulldozed their houses, and so the bees were our protectors and were these creatures, no, that protected the land. And after that, there's a lot of beekeepers in Vieques. And so we started to organize around the ideas of bees and how bees literally organize. So that's how we actually created La Colmena Cimarrona. Translates to the maroon beehive. And we believe in the ways that the bees organize. We are essentially a women-led group. We are all women, most of us. And So we believe a lot in the ways that the bees also they organize, and try to emulate that in the way that we program ourselves and the way that we organize here in Vieques. So we organize around, we farm and we do beekeeping, but we do that because we believe that is the only way to really be self-determined and sovereign. And in a place where we are in constant threat and are in a very toxic environment and are a colony of the colony, that is crucial for us. So we farm because we believe in having sovereignty for our land and for ourselves. And so yeah, that is sort of our political and more, so we farm because it is political. We don't farm because it is only because it's also very pretty and we love to see the plants and everything, but also because it is our way of living.
And could you tell folks a little bit about the history of the word cimarrona? Because I have a background in this. I understand what that means and how powerful that word is. But for folks that may not know, could you tell them a little bit about the history?
Yeah, in English is maroon, which is a very weird word, because I think it also I've always heard it for horses, and so there's this it's a weird translation. But cimarrón is were the enslaved people that decided to not be enslaved and to run away and to organize communities in the Caribbean. And so we believe that we are currently in many ways enslaved, no? And lived in a system that is of enslavement. And so we've organized, because we believe it's very important to organize, as the bees have, around food and sovereignty and health. But yeah, it was the cimarrones. It was sort of the first anti-capitalism, no? So it is the first people who sort of decided that, not the first people, but in our history as Caribbean people, it is an essential history, and that's why we incorporated it in the beehive word, because sometimes beehive is very structured and there's this whole other mindset around the beehive, but we are a maroon beehive.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Elisa. And I'll come back to you on the spiritual part.
Okay.
Think about it and I'll come back to you. And Metz, could you talk a little bit about not just the political essence of the work in that part of San Francisco, but also the other elements of the work that you've been involved in, that are very much grounded in liberatory practices, very similar to Elisa.
Yeah, so living in San Francisco, it's a 7 by 7 mile city, and a lot of it is concrete and steel. There's not a lot of green places. Even the place I work feels like a little haven. So one of the systems that we talk about, the Learning Garden, is like an urban food system and what it means to push back against food deserts and inequalities, even environmental racisms in our community, because we don't have access to public land to create farms. We don't have access to Whole Foods or grocery stores in our communities to be able to get local organic food. And then on top of that, there's just like, I would say, yeah, there's a housing inequity that's also going on. And so on top of being worried about where you're going to be able to live and what you're going to be able to eat, there's this other layer, right? And so that's what I say Hummingbird Farm is doing, by really creating a space that's public land so that folks can farm there, and not only farm, but do it in a way that's focusing on traditional ecological knowledge, that focuses on decolonizing your diet and reclaiming your ancestral traditions, whether that's the way you're planting the seed and praying with it, whether that's the way the space can just have ceremonies there to have in a culture, whether it's Mayan or Nahua, Mexica, just having that space really to have that reciprocal relationship with the land, I feel is very important, has been one of the political, and I would also say spiritual parts of urban agriculture or traditional ecological knowledge, is understanding that reciprocity. And I think honeybees are a part of that, because I think it's like 80 or 85% of our world's food is dependent on pollinators. And one of our primary pollinators is the honeybee. We literally need that insect to move so that that pollen can move, and then it can create fruit and seed, right? And a lot of our heritage is preserving seeds. It's making sure that the next generation has the availability of that seed, and not only does it have that seed, but it has a stronger genetic variation of that seed. And so I think that's what's really important about pollinators, and it's also very political, right? Because that is that's like our DNA, our heritage, right? Like the corn, the frijoles, the calabazas, like those are our heritage and literally embedded into our body. And so that's one of the things I think about. And then I would say something else that I've really learned to think about as a beekeeper is thinking about the competition between native bees and honeybees, and making sure that it's really important to grow food, but there's also, in a city like San Francisco, in an urban space, where also so much of this native ecology has been just completely concrete, it's been poured over it. And honeybees are known for taking a lot of nectar, so it's super, super important to make sure as a land steward, I'm also taking care of my native plants, so that native solitary bees that don't have these eusocial colonies can also get the nectar and pollen they need.
And Metz, can you talk a little bit about also what it means to be a person, like similar, that the three of us are people from multiple lands, from multiple lineages, and even what it means to be a person whose family had to migrate, and the political pressure behind that, specifically for in your case, and then in some of the lineages that you carry, right, as to how it is that you even ended up in Yelamu Huchin.
Yeah, that's a question. Pues, like we talked about, some part of my family is from El Salvador, and another part of my family is from Mexico. My abuelo came from El Salvador when the United States started basically funding the war. They're funding death squads. And really a lot of that was driven by NAFTA and CAFTA, and the role of really monocultural agriculture and really using pesticides and GMOs coming into these communities and displacing people from their land, displacing people from their original water sources, creating unstable job markets of risky ways of gaining wages, and even at that, like, it's not even a living wage. And so my family was pushed to move to the United States. And I think a lot of people have this story where it's kind of like your abuelo leaves first, right? There's like the patriarchy that's involved, of like my abuelita getting left behind and the children getting left behind in that situation until they can come over, and the violence that they have to experience like in that journey is something that I feel like never really left my abuelita, and is something that was a large part of just my understanding and relationship to the world. And so for me, it's really important to get back to some of those things that my family's left. My bisabuela on my abuelito's side did a lot of farming, cultivated, and went to the market to sell. And so I feel like when I'm in the earth, I'm like reconnecting with my ancestors. And so I hope I answered your question, but I think
that was a beautiful answer. And I think I think it's important for people to have that contextualized, right? The reasons that why we migrate, the same reasons that I migrated as well was because of NAFTA. And also one of my grandfathers was a farmer, and he also lost his land in the period after NAFTA. So many of us and so many of our communities outside of the US really being affected by the policies and the violence, the terrorism of the US government, the military. But it's still, despite of that, we're able to still continue our traditions and continue our relationships with the land. So, Annalise, I'm going to go back to you now. How do you see the work that you're doing also as a spiritual work? You know, particularly I think in Borican, particularly with the context of Borican, what are the elements that you see, or how do you see this connected to spirituality?
I think maybe it goes more around spirituality, as Metz was mentioning, no? More towards that reconnection to the land in a way that it's not only like very theoretical, no, but very literal. It's a lot of work. And I guess a lot of us that farm, at least my mother, that comes from that culture in Puerto Rico, we had also politics of manos a la obra, for example, which was basically, it took everybody from the land to the cities. And so the way that people pictured the land was through like feudalism, no? It was the land in like working for one person that had a lot of money, and then a lot of jornaleros, or like people that worked for this one hacienda, no? And so we were disconnected from the land a long time ago. And even though my grandfather, for example, farmed, and my great grandfather, a lot of folks were disconnected. And my mother, for example, was always with that idea of like, but you're gonna farm, you're gonna die of hunger, which is the least you're gonna die of. But you know, there's this whole sort of idea that we're never going to actually have a wage, etc. A living wage. And so it's more of that connection with of going back into the most essential thing, no, which is what we eat and where it comes from, no? And it's literally that connection with the soil. And in Puerto Rico, we still are farming like most of our ancestors farm, no? And in our case, and in terms of spirituality, no, this is sort of a temple, no? It's not the same idea of the temple that we have normally in sort of more westernized cultures, but literally it's our space for healing and for everything. And so I'm not a very religious person, but I am very spiritual, and I tend to not talk about that very much, so it's interesting to sort of verbalize it here. But you have to be very connected to work, for example, with bees, if we're again talking about the bees. And it's a spiritual experience every time you work with bees, because literally you have to be aware of everything. There's no music in the background, it's the bees. And once we were visited by a person from Venezuela that actually was Arawak, and did a lot of practices that the Taínos did with a lot of food here. And he mentioned that they use the bees as like a way of healing, no? They literally use the bees like as chants, etc. The mombi. And he's from the Amazonian River. So it was interesting to connect, no, our cultures now, because in Puerto Rico, our cultures were swiped in many ways, no? From with colonialism and the brutal ways of farming, because it was through sugarcane, and through tobacco, etc. And so also, if we connect even further, although I don't practice Yoruba religion, with Yoruba religion is very present in a lot of the things that the practices here in Puerto Rico, which are African religions, no? And the Yoruba have Ochun, which is she represents sexuality and abundance and many things. And she actually died from eating honey, because it was she loves honey so much that honey was placed as sort of this trampa, ¿cómo se dice trampa? Nada, it was filled with venom, the honey, and so she died. But if we try to reach into all of that also, no, all of those connections, it's even more, it makes sense. There's things sometimes that we do, even with the bees, that it feels like we've been here since forever, no? And I feel that has to do very much with that spiritual connection, no? With the way that we feel the wind, with the way that we feel the land, with the everything. No? It might sound very etéreo, but yeah, it's there in many ways.
Thank you, Annalisa. And yeah, I think the word that you were trying to say was trick. Thank you, Daniela, for bringing that up. And you know, just for folks here in this circle and for whoever watches this later on, the word that we use in Spanish for corn, maíz, is actually a Taíno word. So that just goes to show you how interconnected our communities were prior to colonization, through colonization, and as we decolonize to this day, and as we push back on those colonial forces. So the last question I have for you are both what are the challenges that you're seeing in the work that you're doing, and also what are the changes that you've seen, right? So not only what are the challenges that you're facing, whether it is dealing with the different ways in which climate crisis is affecting your work, right, through the drought, through water shortages, government pressures, but also what are the beautiful and incredible changes that you see in the community. So I'm going to pass the mic first to Metz and then to Annalisa. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think some of the main challenges I can think of are related to climate change in terms of just thinking about watering the plants. There's the drought. I'm constantly having to do the numbers for my water because I don't want to be a part of that wasteful use of water. But I think that's a larger conversation even too, to who gets to use large amounts of water. And the reason we're in a drought is not only related to climate change, it's related to corporations, fracking, oil drilling, monoculture. And I think another thing too that's impacted has been the wildfires. The wildfires can literally, like the ash coming down, sometimes can ruin a crop harvest. I have to be really careful with the habitats, right? I have a habitat pond, so I need to be really careful with like the chemical changes from the ashes in the waters. And I think most of us have experienced like COVID as a challenge and like the pandemic as a challenge. It's certainly been a challenge for me as an educator, not being allowed to have students at the garden, and just have like, and it's an outdoor educational area. So I think, you know, it would have been really nice to have that opportunity. But yes, I think as a beekeeper, in terms of climate change, just noticing on hotter days, less foraging. One of the things that has been interesting though is to see like the positive reaction of bumblebees. So just really watching the balance in the ecology really change, being present and having to observe that constantly. And then I think there was a second part to the question.
What are some of the changes that you've seen, not only in yourself, but in your community as you are involved in this important and sacred work?
Yeah, I think it's been beautiful. A lot of what I've seen has been starting with my family, right? Kind of like starts with your family and like builds out into your larger circle. When I started really getting involved in like ecology and like traditional knowledge and that sort of thing, I was kind of looked at like I was crazy, like, oh, there's a bruja, or like that's, you know, I don't know why she wants to go back to the milpa where we left it. It was the kind of vibe I got. And so now I really see like value from my family coming to me, asking me, oh, you know, I've got this going on. What can, like, how can you support me? Even like them purchasing my items, like whenever I have honey, like is a huge step, because before I would make things and they would look at me like I was crazy. And now it's like, that like I'm kind of like interrupting and breaking down those colonial narratives that they've had in their head, like the only medicine can be prescription. And so that has been really, really beautiful. And then in terms of my like my peers and that sort of thing, just really I have like this passion for restoration, really just connecting with more sisters and more folks around restoration and kind of empowering and lifting each other up in the different things that we're passionate about. And so I think it's a lot of reflection in that sense. And yeah, I think Hummingbird Farm also has come a long way. I'm definitely not as involved as I used to be, but it's so beautiful to see how they're utilizing that land and how there's going to be some watershed restorations projects. So I think just having that center for folks to learn has really opened up to a larger community, specifically a younger community.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think something also that you're connecting to is, and that both of you mentioned, is healing that relationship to land. And that relationship was so damaged and hurt because of enslavement, because of forced migration, because of kidnapping, something that our communities have experienced for the last 528 years. So, you know, the fact that you're doing this work is really changing everything, not only in your family, but in the community. So thank you, Metz. And then Elisa, now I want to hear from you.
No te escucho.
I was talking, I said some amazing things and you could not hear me. Okay, well, I was saying basically that, you know, I think the work that both of you are doing is so important because for the last 528 years, a lot of our communities and our lineages had difficult relationships to land because of enslavement, because of kidnapping, because of forced migration. So the work you're doing is also so healing, right? Not only for your own relationship to the land, but for your family and your community's relationship to the land. So I wanted to hear from you, Ana, and see, you know, how is the climate crisis affecting the colmena cimarrona in Vieques? I know that in the past you've mentioned that there wasn't water, it hadn't been raining. Could you tell us a little bit more about those challenges and also some of the changes that you see from the work?
So there's the climate crisis. I guess the feeling constantly and recently is of como no sé cómo se dice abrumar, como like
it's like
heavy.
yeah, like almost overwhelming, mm-hmm.
I feel like overwhelmed all of the time. Because of drought. Now it's raining, as you know, it's more lush. But Vieques also experiences drought. This year was very weird because every year we sort of plan, because normally our seasons in Vieques normally rains, for example, from September to January, and this year it started raining like now, and it stopped raining later, and it's very hard to plan. And in farming, we need to plan a lot, and so it's very, there's this sense of insecurity constantly, which we already have. Because we live in an island that has no hospital, that doesn't have transportation, that is very food insecure. So it's kind of like abunda to those insecurities. No, it becomes even more more intense. But I think one of the things that has affected, or one of the biggest challenges recently, is that we're worrying about all of this, right? About all of the climate change and having to worry about very minimal things that we need to fix, like things with the water, etc. But then there's the issue of land and being insecure with land. We currently lease land to the land administration in Vieques, which is government, and and we have fiscal sponsorship from an organization called ACER, and it still feels that we are in very colonial and enslaved situation, no? It's a situation that in general it's very overwhelming to work with organizations and be in nonprofits that don't really understand the work with the land. And so we've been moving towards working more with other farmers and doing collective work of organizing amongst farmers and beekeepers, because it's very hard to explain to folks that are not in the land every day, that depend on this. And so it's been hard to organize and to find groups that are not sort of emulating the same structure and bureaucratic structures that we're trying to disrupt, no? And so I think that's been one of the biggest challenges, and to be sort of sure of where we are in the land. We've also been trying to get this land within a land trust. And so, but even that is very bureaucratical, no? So I think these challenges of bureaucracy and these power dynamics and structures, as farmers, we don't have time to be in power struggles. You know, there's no time. I'm thinking about bees and plants, and people are here like trying to you know, we're constantly in these sort of power struggles. And so even these presentations, sometimes I'm hesitant to anything that's not in the land, but I'm glad that Brenny invited me, and that I was able to hear Metz and Brenny and everyone that has somehow participated, because that is healing, no? To be able to hear other people that are sort of in the same boat and in the same having these experiences. And so in our community, I think, again, one of the biggest challenges is the hustle, right? And we're always hustling. But it's cool that we see that now people are hustling to go get the sweet peppers that we're producing, and it's sort of like crack all of a sudden. And in a community where we are filled with so much toxic, where a lot of people have diabetes and hypertension because of the bombing, and because we are very food insecure, it's always very, we're like, oh, that's why we're doing this, no? That's why we're constantly tired, but this always kind of brings back that hope. And sometimes I'm even here in the farm and I'm like super overwhelmed, and then I look over and I see the bees and I see everything, and it's like, okay, you know, this is why we're here. But yeah.
Thank you so much. Muchísimas gracias, Ana. I want to I tell you, everybody here, that we shared both of the websites of the folks that are, you know, here. So not only the Hummingbird Farm, but also La Colmena Cimarrona. If you want to support both of these initiatives, there's ways that you can donate, either time or funds. Sometimes you can also send things, or even just, you know, sharing about the work, I think is important. I also do want to mention that currently Puerto Rico has been going, because it is a colony of the U.S., has been going through a terrible bureaucratic process of an imposed debt that is being tried to be put on the people of Puerto Rico. So if there's any ways in which you can support the struggles, not only of our brothers and sisters in Borica and in Puerto Rico, but also here in Juchín, Yelamu, the Bay Area, please do so. And I encourage folks here to look around in your communities, wherever you might be, whether you're in Texas, whether you're in the Bay Area, wherever you might be, to get in touch and connect and really reconnect with the land. There's so much information there for you. There's billions of years of information there for you, and so much power and beauty there, that's really waiting for you. So please make sure that you look at both of that, and the other thing I wanted to say is I just want to invite KJ for the last musical piece. Thank you so much for everybody that was here. Please do
Ashe,
follow them. I'll put their Instagrams in a minute. Thank you so much.
ashe.
Ashe,
So,
ashe.
I'm gonna, in keeping in line with everything that we're talking about, I'm gonna play a little piece that is in reference to the sweet waters of Oshun, and of course, you know, who's connected to the bees. And this is a little piece called Wave.
Thank you, KJ. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much.
You're welcome.
KJ is one of the most phenomenal jazz musicians of the Bay Area. Originally from LA, has been in the Bay Area for the last few decades. Please do support their work. I shared all of their Instagrams here, La Colmena Cimarrona, also Metz Instagram, KJ's Instagram, and Fluid Mutualism's Instagram. Please, if you
Thank you.
can, support, donate to these initiatives, and again, connect to the land. And if you see a little bee that looks like it's a little tired, sometimes they just need a little water. So
Right.
please, pay attention to the land and the elements around you and the species around you. It is our responsibility to really take care and steward this land. Thank you so much. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye bye.